Hey, what's up? So this is the first video whose topic was more or less chosen by someone making a donation to Olivia's fund. So the donor's prompt was she wanted me to make a video about my friend Kurt for my friend Kurt. And I'm actually going to do something slightly different. I'm going to kind of like riff off that idea. I'm going to make a video that relates to him, is relevant to him, but should also have some sort of universal application and relevance, and that I hope people will find somewhat interesting. So Kurt was actually the guitar player in my very first band, Ancient at Birth. So on that note, let's talk about 7 things that I did wrong in my first band. So before we get into this, I want to establish that this is not like a form of self-punishment or self-flagellation or anything like that. I'm not really interested in taking that approach. I actually think that this is a really fun topic to talk about. It's just really important to me that I be as truthful and honest as possible with how I approach pretty much everything. And the honest truth is I did make a lot of really avoidable mistakes in that first band. Number 1, thinking that I was better than everyone because I knew theory. So no one likes to think of themselves as an egomaniac, right? But in retrospect, I can see that I really did think that I was better than everyone just because I had some formal theory training. So we had this kind of agreement where we understood that everyone's songwriting would be prioritized in order based on how much theory they knew. And since I was the only one who knew any theory, well, you can see where this is going. Now, don't get me wrong, there's some songwriters who just need to be able to do all the writing and all the lyrics, and that's just how they operate creatively, and as long as everyone else in the band knows what's going on and is cool with that, there's nothing wrong with that. That's not what this was. This was essentially me asserting my right to get my way in every situation under the pretense of a strict, impartial meritocracy. And that just kind of sucks. So knowing music theory is generally a good thing. Understanding less about a subject that you're interested in is never preferable to understanding more, right? If you're looking to write like a Berlioz symphony or something like that, it's probably going to be necessary. But knowing music theory is to playing in a rock and a metal band as knowing about your car engine is to being able to drive. Like, is it good to know how your car engine works? Yeah, probably. But fundamentally, if you don't know how to stop at a stop sign, there's not much it's going to do to help. Likewise, you can know the insides and outs of music on a deep technical level. You can have a wide chord vocabulary. You can have a wide scale vocabulary. You can know form. You can know voice leading. But if you don't know how to write a song, all that knowledge is not going to make your music compelling. Speaking of songwriting, number 2, my songwriting was fucking whack. So I actually want to backtrack on that a little bit. My songwriting wasn't always bad. Our first batch of songs was actually really good and pretty well received. My songwriting got bad as soon as I felt confident enough to express myself artistically. So conceptually, on paper, Ancient at Birth was a proggy, thrashy, melodic death metal band. Our first couple songs were kind of technical, maybe a little weird, but fundamentally it was the kind of stuff that your average metal fan could listen to. So we gained a small local following pretty quick, and that little bit of recognition went to my head so badly that I just kind of assumed that those first few listeners were so sold on me as a songwriter that they would be down to hear me go completely off the deep end and just abandon any semblance of structure or clarity in the name of artistic expression. My friend Trey Xavier has done a really, really good job in popularizing the concept of riff salad, right? The direction we went in after getting off the ground a little bit was less riff salad and more like note salad. It wasn't just technical in the standard technical or progressive metal sense. It was technical in a completely impractical sort of way. The songs were basically long, nonsensical streams of barely related notes, no phrasing and no purpose. It took literal months to learn a single song. They were so over the top technical that we could never play them clean. They were so abstract and weird that we could never keep the song structure memorized, and we were train wrecking constantly live. And even in the rare occasions where we got everything perfect, the audience was still not that impressed because what they were getting was not a memorable, meaningful song. It was what they probably perceived as an impenetrable wall of notes. So at the end of the day, what I had us doing was putting way, way more effort in than was practical or sustainable just to get a worse result than we would have gotten if we just played traditional 4-chord heavy metal. So it's important to keep in mind that it was not my intention to write meaningless noise. In my head, everything made perfect sense. It was just, challenging and forced the listener to really dive in and analyze what they were hearing until they arrived at the right interpretation. The thing is, why was the onus on the listener to create meaning out of the music that I was giving them rather than on me to give them music that they found meaningful? Why did I expect the audience to work towards enjoying my music when I was making no attempt at all to make the music the slightest bit accessible? Which brings us to number three. Number three, I saw myself as the tortured genius archetype. So look, we're all creative types here, right? Creative types like us love the tortured genius archetype. You know, your Beethovens, your Kurt Cobains, your Jim Morrisons.
It's not about money, or records or success, it's about using the music to break through, wasn't it?
We all love the idea of just being this deep, mysterious figure with a dark past who takes a lifetime of pain and anguish and just channels it into creating these artistic, generation-defining masterpieces in our own heads without having any outside input whatsoever.
I had a whole concert in my head,
And the appeal is pretty obvious, right? We all like to think of ourselves as significant. We love the idea that our art and our work is going to be appreciated and studied and analyzed long after we're gone. But here's the thing. If you're a musical genius, you will know about it because people will probably tell you. You will not be the only person who thinks you're a genius. But I think there's also another appeal, which is that if you're a musical genius, that kind of makes your work beyond any sort of criticism or reproach, right? Like if you present a song and somebody says, oh yeah, I like this, but what if we do this one part slightly differently? If you're a musical genius, then that person is not just, making an honest to God attempt to have the song be as good as possible. They're actively trying to dilute your creative vision. They're trying to water down an important piece of art before it has a chance to be recognized as the masterpiece that it is. Would you ever tell God that you have some suggestions for how to improve the colors of a sunset? I don't think so. In fact, just the fact that they have that criticism means that you're smarter than them because they can't recognize genius when they see it. And because I thought that I was a once-in-a-generation musical genius, I would not allow anything to change the way I went about songwriting. Which brings us to number four. Number four, I didn't write to the strengths of my players. So here's a big secret in the metal world. For as much as it has the reputation of being, the musician's genre that you need a lot of skill to play, metal is actually really accommodating for a wide variety of skill levels. As long as your drummer can play on time and your singer has personality, you can pretty much play metal no matter what your skill level is. Absolutely no Motorhead fan has ever said, this would sound a lot better if there was more laser-tight neoclassical riffing. So in my first band, I had one guitar player who was really good at leads, not so good at rhythm, and my other guitar player was really good at rhythm, not so good at leads. So given that what I was trying to go for was this really abstract, classically influenced technical metal, the answer should have been obvious. Have the one guy playing rhythm most of the time and have the other guy playing lead most of the time. But guess what? I didn't. Instead, I wrote to have both of them playing everything, which means that no matter where we were in the song, there was someone who was playing outside of their comfort zone. Because again, it just comes back to this idea that if I am a musical genius, why should I have to temper my artistic vision just because some guy doesn't know how to sweep pick? Please, 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 if you take anything away from this video, let it be this. Learning your limitations as a band and working around them is going to be more productive and have better results than haranguing your players about practicing things that they do not have an inclination towards and that they have no interest in. In spite of this though, number five, I knew as a fact that we were better than every other local band in our area. So other bands in a local scene play this kind of paradoxical role of being simultaneously your competition and your support network. Navigating that can be tricky, but if you catch yourself genuinely believing that you're better than any other band in your local scene, you might want to bury that feeling. Fundamentally, the only way that anyone has any hope of succeeding is by everyone building each other up instead of tearing each other down. Let's say that you have 800 monthly listeners on Spotify and your friend's band has 200. There's basically two ways of interpreting this one data point. Number one, I have 4 times as many monthly listeners as they do. That means I am 4 times better than they are. And number two, hey, both of us are in the triple digits of monthly listeners. That number could crater at any time. So if we start networking, maybe we can both break into the quadruple digits together. I'm assuming you don't need 3 guesses to figure out which is the healthier approach. Now, despite the fact that, as I mentioned before, my band could barely make it through a set without train wrecking, and the fact that audiences were, over the course of our short career, growing more and more tepid to what we were doing, as far as I was concerned, we were so obviously the best band in that area that we didn't even need to pretend that we respected the other bands. The truth truth, however, is we were better than none of the other bands in our area. We weren't necessarily worse, but we were not better. Not even the bands with the simplest and most straightforward music who we thought embodied everything that bands shouldn't be doing. In fact, the bands that I took the least seriously back then are generally the bands whose music I come back to the most today. But not only did I think we were better than other local bands, number 6, I knew that we were better than every pro band. So being an aspiring musician is convenient in the sense that there is already a highly detailed roadmap to how to get songwriting right. It's called The Bands You Already Listened To. I was listening to a ton of really cutting edge stuff. Nevermore, Arch Enemy, In Flames, Children of Bodom, Soilwork, everything. And I'd hear them and I would say, oh yeah, obviously the guitar playing and the production are really good, but you know, they're not really doing anything fundamentally that interesting or unique. Not like we're doing. So I shouldn't even need to point out the fact that when you catch yourself thinking Nevermore could learn a thing or two about songwriting from me, you probably have an ego problem you need to work on. The fact that I was deliberately choosing to see all these bands as beneath me meant that I was not going to be able to draw any influence from them, which meant that I was writing in complete and total creative isolation, not allowing anything to penetrate this bubble that I had created for myself. But even everything I've mentioned up until now does not compare with number 7, divide and conquer strategy. So I had this method of manufacturing consent from my bandmates where I would pull each of them to the side one by one and say, hey, do you think so-and-so needs to be doing this differently? And I would harangue them until they gave me a reluctant, sure, I guess. I'd go person by person and do that. Then I would call a band meeting and say, hey, so-and-so, we've all been talking and we all agree that you need to be doing this differently. Needless to say, this was deceptive, extremely unethical, and in retrospect is probably what ended up killing the band. I think that for the most part, musicians can be willing to tolerate some pretty weird choices, but once people realize they are being manipulated, no one is willing to tolerate that. And yeah, not gonna lie, when we broke up, it was pretty ugly and acrimonious. So fast forward to today, me and all those guys are on really good terms right now. So now, was I the only person who was making mistakes in this band? No. So I think that my level of responsibility for the dysfunction in that band falls somewhere between 60-40 and 70-30. But seeing as how I'm the one who I have to live with every single day, my mistakes are the ones I'm the most interested in. I also don't want to create the impression that it was all bad times. It wasn't. We had a lot of fun playing together and we had some really good shows, especially early on. It just wasn't sustainable because the core of this project was me trying to show off how smart and artistically enlightened I was rather than share music with the listeners, and that is a fact. In conclusion, don't be an egomaniac, treat people you work with well, and have the ability to honestly assess your songwriting, and your band will probably be able to avoid a lot of the mistakes that my first band did not. So yeah, thank you again, Catherine, for donating to Olivia's fund. Really appreciate that. Kurt, what's up? And yeah, if you found this interesting in any way, then don't forget to like and subscribe and hit the bell for notifications, and I will see you around. Late.